Okay, well, a very good evening and a very warm welcome to the first of our PhD careers panel events. We have a precedent of this on the undergraduate program, whereby we've invited alumni from the Department of Statistics to give us an insight into their working lives after they finish the LSE. But those are more aimed at the more general graduate market. This is going to be a PhD-specific event. So we have a lovely panel here with us tonight, and thank you very much for taking out the time from your very busy schedules to come and be with us. So I would invite each panellist to introduce themselves to the room and for about 5 minutes give a brief biography of your working lives to date, and we'll go around in order. I'll conclude both as an alumnus as well as a departmental representative, and I'll offer the academic perspective. So I will start off on my left with Sandrine.
Hi, everybody. So it feels strange to be back. So I actually graduated in 2010. I did my PhD with Tobelem-Foldvari as a supervisor. And I think my case is a bit more specific than others because I was actually working full-time the whole time I was doing my master and my PhD, so I was quite rarely here. But anyway, I did a master in statistics, but really mostly towards finance and portfolio allocation. And I actually was already working in finance when I was doing my PhD. And I'm still working in finance. So I started my career working for an investment bank as a quantitative analyst. And I actually was working on the proprietary desk on the equity division. And I still worked in this type of area throughout my career. So after Goldman, I'm not sure I should name the names, but then I actually moved to another bank, and finally I actually started to work for hedge funds because of the regulation changes. A lot of prop traders who actually invest the money of the bank had to actually leave the banks because the banks were not allowed anymore to do well, or not openly allowed to do it anymore. And actually one of my ex-bosses from one of the investment banks I was working for set up his own hedge fund, and I joined him in 2013. So I think it's a pretty logical path in terms of trading and proprietary trading. I would say that specifically for me, it's a bit different probably from other people because I already had a job when I started to do my PhD, but my job is very oriented towards research. So I think being an independent researcher, being able to work under pressure, but also without much of supervision, and being able to actually go through research from beginning to end and try also empirically to try and apply it was really important in my job, and it still is very important. And I think doing a PhD really helped me consolidating, this type of work and the way I can do it now. I'm very genuinely interested in research, and I'm still trying to write some papers. So it's very slow, but I'm still doing it. It's obviously part of my job in a way. I read a lot of research papers, and also my PhD really helped me, being able to scroll through research, being able to screen papers and try and get, what I need from them and apply it in my day-to-day job. So that's pretty much it, I guess, about me. So I'm really happy to be back here and be very happy to, answer your questions if you have some.
Indeed, we'll have a little Q&A session at the end. Thank you very much, Sandrine. Right.
Hi, so I'm Roy. I graduated from the Department of Statistics with a PhD in 2012 under the supervision of Youyou. My thesis was on dimensionality reduction methods under some conditions of dependency that are very applicable for time series. After the PhD, I was looking for a job, and somehow I got into a job with the strange title of data scientist. I didn't know why. It's not quantitative analyst, but then it turned out since then that it's became like a buzzword, and many people in my industry wants to be data scientist, and it's generally applying different set of models and skills ranging from machine learning, visualization, programming, and so on. I rolled kind of between different roles and positions. Some might say a little bit too much since then. Since I graduated, at some point I was also working in finance also for a year, and we had like a small startup hedge funds for high frequency trading. We didn't make any money, and after a year it was closed. Then I continued rolling again into a different position in digital advertising. And most recently, in the last 2 years, I work in Microsoft in a team of Bing, which is the search engine that we all love to use. And we're also responsible to different other products within Microsoft that requires the same set of features as in Bing, which are usually helping users to find the content that they want using language modeling. I think what I took from the PhD is, I think mainly the skill sets that I developed through the PhD. So, as a confession, I never managed to apply my PhD model outside in industry. I tried once, but it turns out that the simulations I was making in the PhD for 100, 300, and 500 observations didn't scale down to 5 million or billion observations, so I had to usually look for other methods that are very more applicable, and usually outside of when you will go out of PhD, if you'll go to industry, you'll realize you need to develop a new set of skills in addition to the skills that you already acquired, and many of them are about doing things in practice and programming, and not necessarily always writing papers or developing theory. So the learning curve doesn't stop after you finish the PhD, which is the good news, I think. And maybe last word, you will compete against other people coming from other departments. I think especially in my industry, many people coming to work in the same position from computer sciences and other positions, they have completely different set of skills. And usually I'm jealous of their skills of computing, and they're jealous of my skills of understanding of statistics. That's what's waiting for you outside in the industry. And feel free to come and ask me any questions after this.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Youyou. I've graduated from LSE in 2015, so my work life has not been as long as yours. So I did my PhD with Angelos in Brownian excursions and the application to finance. So in that sense, it is a little bit. So my PhD was a little bit different than a classic statistics PhD, which uses somehow time series and data sets, whereas mine was more focused on stochastic calculus and in a pure math sense. So during the PhD and after the PhD, so my dream job was to go to a bank and work on pricing options and pricing exotic options, because that was somehow what I did in my PhD theoretically. However, having not really done any internships before graduating and enjoying myself too much during my PhD, I never really understood that pricing doesn't exist anymore in the sense it used to 10 years ago, because all the contracts are moving back to vanilla contracts, there's no real demand for exotic option prices and hedges. So applying for a job somehow got me to, my first job got me to credit risk modeling. So credit risk is actually, since 2008, has been becoming very, very big. And as a quant in credit risk, what we do is calculate or model the capital requirements and the RWA a bank has to hold to allow for its risk. So that was my first job. I think it was a good start for me, but also I didn't really understand what it was before I joined. So one good tip is really make sure you know what you're going into, and talk to people and see what their day-to-day life is, and try to understand as much as possible what this role is going to be about. Of course, it's very difficult because you never really have the insight as you have when you really start your job. So I did this. I started before I finished my PhD about a year, and it's been really good. I've did this for another 2 years, and recently, 10 months ago, I've left and I've joined a hedge fund in London. So it's from the work, it's very, very different. Also not, my PhD is also not too applicable to my current work either. But as Roy already said, I think the way of thinking, way of doing research, and the way of make sense of research papers is what we learn during our PhDs mostly. And I absolutely love my current job. It is not just different from the work we do, but it's also a completely different culture. Coming from a big investment bank to a small hedge fund, the culture is completely different. It's almost more a family-sized organization, and people are a lot more collegiate and help each other in any respect. Now I'm just talking too much. I think so. Two important things of finding the right job is to make sure that you know what the job is about and whether it's really something you want to do. And secondly, to prepare. I've gone through dozens and dozens of interviews, and it is not just difficult to get through them, but also to find the one which you like. And I have a lot of good book recommendations for preparing for quant interviews, which I would like to share with you later.
Thank you. Dan.
Okay. So I graduated in 2012 as well. Spent most of my time with Roy together, actually, in the same years. And towards the end, we found out we were working on quite similar topics, even on conditional density estimation. But I looked at it from a very different angle. And similar to everyone, I never really looked back and used any of what I was doing now. After I graduated, I joined Citi in a group which on the credit side, which was doing algorithmic trading, and I think it was pretty much the kind of job I was looking for, and I was very happy initially. I was happy in the end as well, but I realized more and more that on the credit side, algorithmic trading is quite hard because it gets more and more regulated, and the liquidity in the market is relatively low. And so I quite enjoyed what I was doing. CDS, we were trading CDS indices, but overall doing that algorithmically is difficult essentially. And so the more and more I realized that I decided I want to leave. And in the end, after 3 years, I went to a hedge fund called Squarepoint Capital. That was 2 years ago. And now I work on low-frequency equity strategies. Low frequency means, in our case, it can mean many things, I suppose. But in our case, it means we hold our portfolio roughly 3 to 6 months or so. yeah, I think it's quite similar from the work Sandrine was describing, researching strategies, trying to find signals that eventually make money. Also similar to what Roy was saying, that a lot of the time you actually spend implementing rather than thinking, or I rarely write at all, and I've barely got a pen and a paper. So a lot of the time, I program and I implement. Low frequency equity is, I wanted that. I was given a choice between higher frequency stuff and lower frequency stuff, but I find it's statistically it's probably a bit more interesting, and economically it's probably also, I decide for me anyway, I find it more useful. And and that's pretty much what I'm doing now.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And perhaps I'll conclude. So I guess among the panel, I'm the statistical outlier here, in that I'm still at the LSE. Although when I started on my PhD, I assumed I was going to follow a very similar career path to many of the panelists here. I sort of saw myself as a quant at an investment bank or a hedge fund. However, during my PhD studies, I started to be a GTA on SD102, as I know some of you in the room have been and currently are. And I remember when I took my very first undergraduate class, it filled me with trepidation. I assumed the students were going to ask me questions that I couldn't possibly answer. But I've discovered the appropriate response to that. It's beyond the scope of the course. So it's a good line. But I took my very first class, and then I just fell in love with teaching. And of course, to proceed in an academic career, be it more research-oriented or even purely teaching-focused, there's likely to be a teaching element to that, and you will need to complete that a doctorate and ideally pursue the PG Cert, a teaching qualification. This was still quite a new program within the LSE. This was going back a few years now, but I was one of the early participants on the PG Cert program, and increasingly those wanting careers in academia, it's very helpful on any job applications to say you've been through the PG Cert route and you've been keen to develop your teaching expertise. So having progressed through various stages following completion of the PhD, I became an LSE Fellow, but these are time-limited positions. And as of about 12 months ago, LSE has launched this new education career track. So research has always been number one, and I think that maintains its status here at LSE, but the importance of teaching has really risen, mainly to make sure we have satisfied students. So LSE has invested in this new education career track. I'm one of the first members of staff on this. So I am not really research active at the moment, so I tend to spend most of my time on teaching related activities. So it's not just the delivery of the lectures, supervising class teachers, building student queries, and of course all of the examining and assessment arrangements. So teaching is something I'm very passionate about, and so I never expected, and you asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing, I was expecting to share a similar story as some of our panelists here. So that's my 2 cents. In terms of longer term, do I see myself staying in education for the foreseeable future? Yes, I enjoy what I do, and I think perhaps that's the most important part of any job, is to get up in the morning and look forward to what you're going to do rather than facing the day with dread. So we all have our different interests and what interests us. So my advice is you do what you actually really enjoy and love, and then you don't really actually have to work a day in your life if you really enjoy your career. Okay, well those were our sort of brief introductions. This is very much your event, and I invite any questions to any members of the panel. So we'll do this for a few minutes. There are some drinks and nibbles outside, so we will progress to there once the main questioning has concluded. So, any questions from the floor? It's like a class, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you should be the expert in, you know, cold calling, exactly.
Rapid.
So this is for anyone really, but I'm just wondering, in your first jobs out of your PhDs, how crucial was having a PhD for you to get that job? I mean, were you competing with other master's students, or was it like an essential requirement that you had to have a PhD in something like statistics?
Or maybe what I can say, because I had a job before I actually graduated, but from what I can tell from the evolution of the industry, is that I think it became more and more, like finance became more and more quantitative. Also, it changed completely from looking for mathematicians doing stochastic calculus that we all studied somehow, to something much more oriented to pure empirical statistics dealing with a lot of data, and where the skill set required was very much towards computer sciences and manipulating data. So you could really see a very clear shift in the type of people that the industry was looking for, and I think it's true in finance, but it's true in a lot of quantitative jobs. And I think that the competition for high-skilled jobs feels like it's become a bit tougher. And I speak for myself, but like I worked for a very big hedge fund, for Man Group, AHL. They only look for PhD students. There are some people who graduated from masters that are as good as PhD students, but I think it's just a way to detect talent.
Right.
And also a lot of financial institutions developed some links with academia, because for them it's just easier to attract directly some pupils. And I would say that clearly, if you want to do some quantitative job, it is better to have a PhD. But that's probably my view of it. Then when you started your job, you can ditch your PhD, because that's when you understand really the content of your PhD itself is not what is going to really help you in your job. I think what the PhD tells to your recruiter is that you're a person who is a hard worker, is resilient, is going to work for a long time towards the same goal, and has some technical skills. And then you have to learn on your job, because I think from all of us, and for you it's probably the same, I think your PhD, when you do a PhD, I guess that you're interested to learn, and you have to continue to learn.
Yes, it's a bit like, I guess, like even your undergraduate students. I would say 95% of what they learn during their studies they will never actually use in the world of work. So I suppose even a PhD, a bit like a bachelor's degree, it's all about the signalling element of education. It's the fact that you have done a PhD and the research skills, etc., that you've developed, rather than what you've actually researched on specifically. And I think everyone of the panelists has said none of the PhD content has really been used in our respective careers, but it's more about that signalling.
Yeah, it's the signaling and the methodology you actually learn during your PhD to actually learn further. It's a signal because it tells recruiters that you're going to be capable of learning fast what is needed for the job. And I think that's what is most important. And also because you can't predict how the industry is going to evolve. And you're probably going to have to follow the path if you want to continue working. So you're going to have to do a lot of data mining, probably do a lot of machine learning. For instance, I never had a class about machine learning per se when I was a student, but I had to learn it quite a lot because my job needs machine learning techniques. So yeah, I think it's a methodology
and that adaptability, so you don't know everything, and there's always a process.
I think what's also a little bit confusing about how do we actually find our first job after the PhD is, so I know about all investment banks, have graduate schemes where you join after you graduate with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, and it's kind of straightforward. You do like 2-3 years of rotating things and desks, and you find out what you somehow given the opportunity to find out what you like, and then you dwell into your position. But this is different to us, so somehow we don't really qualify for these graduate schemes, but we're also not experienced. So you cannot really find a job by applying to a website. It has to go through recruiters. So the first thing all of you have to do is set up a LinkedIn profile. I think that's the only way, or that's the only way to get your CV out there.
And I think from my experience as well, if we start, we have to be useful to you and try and give you the best advice we can. I think networking is extremely important. Networking with your peers, networking with the new students, networking with the older students, networking with the network, the LSE networks that exist is very important and especially because I think when you do a PhD, you have specific skills. So the jobs you're going to look for are going to be a bit more specific as well. Because otherwise it would be kind of a waste of your PhD not to try and go for, higher skilled type of jobs where you do research. And I totally agree, you would probably not find those jobs just advertised globally. I actually did those rotations because I started to work before, and it's true that it's a good thing, but obviously you're very young and you're like, you don't really know what you're going to do. And then a lot of people build a career kind of randomly because they started this internship and then it led to a job that they liked and then they pursued it. But once you've done a PhD, you are more, I would say, you're looking for something a bit more specific, and I think it will help you a lot to interact and network with people who have the same type of skill set.
Maybe one small addition is that you're coming out with a PhD in statistics in a really good time because again all this thing with machine learning and data is booming really. There are so many positions out there. And I just find that the market also, the recruiting market is becoming efficient. You just put a LinkedIn profile and you get so many headhunters or other companies, and also this is becoming more programmatic, finding LinkedIn profiles that are relevant for jobs. So it's becoming more and more efficient. So definitely put a LinkedIn profile, and I believe you will start getting people contacting you.
And also there's a website called eFinancial Careers. That's very useful with specific job adverts. So you can upload your CV on eFinancial Careers, and then recruiters can see your CV and you can apply to jobs directly through that webpage.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because even though we all said that our PhD were completely useless when we started to work, it's not entirely true. And I think some people actually, are looking for people who worked on specific projects. Because if you're looking for someone who already, used a certain, machine learning techniques that they actually want to try and apply, it's going to be just easier for them to recruit their PhD students who did his or her PhD on that topic. And even though maybe, you're going to end up, using other techniques because you realize that the technique you used in your PhD is not applicable to a bigger data set, or for some X or Y reasons you can't use the same software, or I don't know. It's not true that it was not useful at all. You're going to be much quicker to analyze why you need another method, and then hopefully much quicker to deliver an end product for your employer. And I think they know that, and LinkedIn is very good for that, because and it's very important to have a well-specified profile where you specify what you've been working on. If you wrote some papers, try and be specific, because the recruiters will look, or people who are looking for those skill sets, they will look for that specifically. and it will and you get contacted very often and easily.
Yeah, and also maybe again to talk about the usefulness of the PhD. So yeah, as I said, I never applied the method I used in the PhD, but the basics are super useful. Dimensionality reduction. If you look at any method today that is relevant in machine learning, they all use variable selection, dimensionality reduction. Even if you go to the most black boxy applications today, deep neural networks, it's dimensionality reduction, it's gradient descent, it's stuff that you know and you require the skills to understand it better than people without those skills.
And I think if your specific question is that what differentiates a master student from a PhD student? A master student is going to learn techniques very dogmatically from a teacher or from a professor who is going to show them how to use things. When you're a PhD student, you have a question, you have to find your solution yourself. You're going to have to look for resources yourself, and you're going to have to design the solution from beginning to end. And even though it's not going to be like a solution that can be applied, not everybody is Albert Einstein or Bachelier, and their PhD is going to be like a revolution in science. However, a PhD students normally should have proven the fact that they can lead a project from beginning to end. A master student has not necessarily. He's learned some things, but I would say a master student is more passive than a PhD student. I'm sure you agree.
I agree with everything you just said. But Mike, I guess what I was getting at more was whether this is appreciated by your potential employer. But it sounds like from what you're saying is that this is who it is, right?
Well, I think clearly the industry is looking for people that are quite skilled, not only the financial industry, and it's PhD, and especially from the LSE, it's a good signal.
Yeah, I would think that, I think I heard once here in one of the career events that the name LSE will get you an interview, it will not pass you the interview. Once you get the interview too, so I think also PhD will get you interviews for research positions that without it you may not be able to get. And after this, it's up to you.
Yeah, and if I can give another advice that I think is very important is that you're very lucky to be here. You are surrounded by people who've been selected, hopefully quite well. So they're going to do well. And it's a nice network to do. First, it's better to have friends when you do your PhD because it can feel quite lonely sometimes. And do not undermine the importance of building your network from the time when you do your PhD. Because to go back to what James was saying, what you want is to wake up in the morning and do a job you like. So of course, what is important is do something that you like, but it's also very important to do it with people you really like. And that you can do if you build your network, and then ultimately you're going to start working with people because you are more confident and you're going to enjoy better your job, I guess. So yeah, your PhD is not only about theory, it's important to develop your connections.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What's the one piece of advice that you wish someone had told you at this stage before you finished your degree, your PhD? Any of them?
Good question.
The main one is enjoy your time. When you finish your PhD, I know PhD looks very tough, but it might be even tougher outside. Enjoy it. It's the last stage of your life. You don't have a boss. And you only meet with your boss once a week or once in a month, which is a supervisor. Enjoy it. It's your last chance to be free.
God. So for me that was very different actually. I found my PhD a lot harder than my work, yeah.
Right. I kind of miss my PhD sometimes. Yeah. It's been great time. Yeah. Yeah, apart from this, as I said earlier, I think again I wish I had more skills in programming. I think it's very important, and what we learn, main skills I got are understanding theory, proving things, understanding data, which is relevant, but programming is very important. And I guess you all do simulations in R or Python, whatever, but you need very strong programming skills, because you will need to compete with people that can implement a model maybe quicker than you, even if they don't understand exactly what a model does. So, and they might be more useful than you. So the computing skills are very important.
Quite competitive.
Yeah, it is. That's why I miss it.
Actually, one thing I really regretted now, what I didn't do during my PhD, is when you have time, take all the courses LSE has to offer in anything, really, in anything that interests you, but also all the things which you maybe didn't do in your undergrad and your master's, but like artificial intelligence, like things you're interested in, which can be useful in your later job, which makes things a lot easier. I wish I would have gone to all the courses they would have offered. But that's just me. But it's only 2 hours, right? I mean.
Yeah, I think it's true. You have to learn as much as you can. You have to focus on computing skills because it's very important. And I think like an advice that would be quite important when you finish your PhD, that try and prepare what you want to do, because the PhD is the tools. Like it's a signal. It's the tools you have, and you need to know what you want to do next. Try and sometimes, because I think you may have a tendency when you do a PhD to think, oh my God, I need to finish it, I just need to finish it and to get it done, and you're buried into it, and you reread like all those 20, 30 papers all the same, and you become completely, focused on one thing, which is your PhD, but you want to make it useful for you later on, so you need to think a little bit about what you want to do next. And that's why you have to be careful not to bury yourself too much into your own PhD. And that's why, maybe it's refreshing actually just to sometimes think, okay, this week I'm going to go to this class, learning something that has absolutely nothing to do with my PhD right now, but will ultimately help you as well later on.
And also like during the interview, so you will all definitely get an interview, but when you get to the interview process, you will be surprised by the questions they ask, especially for junior roles. I don't know, maybe later it's going to be completely different about experience. For junior roles, it's going to go back to your undergrad math, right? And I have forgotten all of it, like completely. So they asked me how to write an efficient sorting algorithm, right? So I mean, we've all learned this, but do you still remember how to do it, or like all these kind of things are worth refreshing, anyways?
Oh yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that, and that is actually the most useful I got out of my PhD is the teaching, because similar to James, I spent a lot of time teaching because I enjoyed it very much. And just going over ST100 again and again and again, I knew it inside out. It's incredibly useful, not only for interviews, but also later on in the job. So simple things like the bias variance trade-off. I find it's coming up, but it's sort of for someone who's perhaps not so quite used to it. They don't always see it, but it's coming up in almost any application. There is some sort of bias variance trade-off, and just being a bit, skilled in that and detecting that. That's very useful, but So the thing is, in interviews, you're trying to find. Particularly, you start as the person who conducts the interview. You're trying to start easy and find a common ground, and you don't know what the expertise of the other one is. And chances are the other one is a lot smarter, and what he's been doing his PhD, and he would lose me after a minute, right? So you always go back to what you think is the common denominator. So, and that is the undergraduate. It's typically not the PhD.
Yeah.
And sorry, to the previous question, one of the things I do find in investment banks, PhD in City, it was absolutely necessary. So I think out of the bigger quant analyst group, we were about 100 or so, 98 or so had a PhD. I think predominantly as a single advice. In the hedge fund where I currently work, it's not necessary. I think it's because it's a very French-driven place, and a lot of the background is that they do French grand écoles, and then they may do a master's or so, but then they start working. I disagree with Sandrine in the usefulness. I see very, very clever and very good researchers who haven't done a PhD, and I just don't think it's correlated. I honestly don't. My boss, I think he did LSE as well. He did economics in LSE. And I think 2 bachelors than that 15 years ago or so. I don't think he did a master's. And he's a better researcher than I am. So, very little correlation.
I'm not sure it's little correlation. I think it's more a general signal thing that, PhD students would have more, maybe on average, capabilities. But I totally agree with you, and I think it's like anyone, if someone quite young knows their path and they are very good researcher, why would they lose their time doing a PhD when they know already what they're gonna do? Yeah. So I think it's and I think it's important to have very stable, strong basics, because maybe you are not going to do like very fancy, difficult models, but the things you do, you're gonna have to do it well, and it's expected that basic statistics, you should really know what it means. And actually, oddly enough, when you've been studying it only and never really applied it yourself, I think when you teach, you realize that you've understood something when you're able to really explain it very clearly to other people. And it's quite a big step, I would say. So, I don't know.
Thank you. Perhaps time for one more question, and we can head out to the reception area. It's like a class again. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed our panel this evening. I'd just like to invite you all to give a warm round of appreciation to our panellists, and also Penny at the back for being the brainchild of the event and bringing all of this together. So show your appreciation. Thank you.